Hello, this is the first lesson for National Modern Studies. The first 5 lessons will cover the broad topic of the nature and extent of crime, but today's lesson will focus on a key bit. What we will do for each set of lessons, and for each lesson we will identify some of the key exam style questions that could come up around that topic. So over the next 4 or 5 lessons we will cover all of these topics here, but today's lesson is primarily focused on the first one there, so describing in detail 3 different types of crime. So we're going to focus today on the different types of crime, different crime groupings, and how the government decide about crime. Okay, so to start off, what I'd like you to do is stop the video here, just pause it, and there are 4 questions I'd like you to think about. The first one is, what do you think a crime is? The second, who do you think decides what a crime is? Third one is, what is a crime and what isn't a crime? Does it change from place to place, from country to country maybe, or from period of time to period of time? And finally, can you think of any examples of this being the case? Pause your video, write down a couple. I will go through a few examples as we go, but I'd like to have a think about these questions first. Okay, so 3 examples I would provide at this point for some of this would be, so first question, who do you think what a crime is? I will give you a definition in a minute. Who says what crime is? That's the government of the country. Does it change? Well, here's the good examples there of changing in time and place. The first one is to do with witchcraft. As I'm sure you're aware, being a witch was previously a crime in the UK. Obviously that's no longer the case, but that's an example of it changing. The middle one relates to punishments within school. Previously you could punish kids in school, sometimes they're hit with canes and like that, for example. Obviously that's no longer allowed, so rules have changed around that. And smoking, you guys are probably too young to remember, but if you ask your parents, they will remember a time when you used to be able to smoke in restaurants and pubs and so on, but that has now changed. So smoking within public places is now banned. You have to smoke outdoors now, but that has, as an example again, of something that has changed within society recently. So crime is any action which breaks the formal law of society and for which a person can be punished. So basically, if it goes against the laws of the country that you are currently in, it becomes a punishment. So I would definitely make sure you have a note of this definition of crime, what it actually is. Again, if you need to pause the video to write that down, I would do so. So laws are made by the government. Those who picked the third year modern studies, you will remember some of the work we did around the different levels of government. So we have the UK government, the Scottish government, devolved reserved powers. Because canon law and the judicial system is something that is devolved to the Scottish Parliament, that means the Scottish Parliament are in charge. So there are some differences within laws between different parts of the UK. So for example, in Scotland there are slightly different laws on certain areas. So for example, would be drink driving. The drink driving limit in Scotland is slightly lower than it is in England and Wales. So because it's a devolved power, it's largely the Scottish government to make laws. Most of the laws are similar between different parts of the UK, but there are a few in Scotland that are only in Scotland and not in other parts of the UK. So as it says there, members of Parliament decide the UK's laws. They apply throughout the UK. As I was saying, devolved powers since 1999, the Scottish government have had devolved powers. That means that some of the laws are made within Scotland, so things like health and so on have been ruled by the Scottish Parliament, and so too as crime. So it would largely be the Scottish Parliament now who would be responsible for creating laws in Scotland. Obviously in the COVID response, you can see an example of this devolved reserve power. There's slightly different laws at present regarding the lockdown and the extent of it between England and Scotland. Here's some more examples of laws changing between times and places. So the first one here is obviously gay marriage. Same-sex marriage was something that was outlawed for many years in Britain. Only recently it's become legal. It used to be a punishable crime for many years across the UK, but it's currently legal. It's changed to legal, and therefore it's a good example of laws changing from time and place. The use of cannabis is another law that changes a lot. Places like Amsterdam and quite a few states now in America have legalised the use of cannabis within certain shops or for medical use. That's something some people would like to see in the UK, but at present it's different in the UK as it's illegal. So again, we've got a different time and place, so depending on where you are, if you're in Amsterdam in Holland, you'd be allowed to smoke cannabis in certain places. in the UK, it's a criminal offence. So that's an example of changing again. Marriage, rape within marriage was actually legal in the UK until 1993. So up until 1993, you couldn't be punished for raping your wife. Obviously, that is now an offence. It is within sort of broader grouping of domestic abuse. So again, a law that's changed over time. And the final one is to do with Saudi Arabia. So up until recently, women in Saudi Arabia were not allowed to drive. It was illegal for women to drive in Saudi Arabia, something women could obviously do in basically every other country. So again, an example of laws being different depending on the place in the world you are in at the time. So laws are socially constructed. The important thing to have taken from the last few slides is that laws are socially constructed. They're created by a society, and what a society deems should be legal and or illegal. Therefore, they differ from place to place. What we in Scotland or in the UK would deem to be a criminal offence may not be a criminal offence in other places, and vice versa. So be aware that crimes are basically created by the government, and this is the government's decision what they think should be legal or illegal. So that was just a quick introduction to crime. All you need to know from those previous slides is basically what crime is, the definition you should have written down. You should know that the government are the ones who make the laws, and you should know that laws can differ from different historical periods and can differ from different locations around the world and countries. The second bit, this is the most important bit, types of crime. So how are crimes grouped? Obviously there's hundreds of different sorts of crimes, but because the government try and record crime, they try and keep crime statistics, they try and use it within the police to record crime and know criminal trends, so what crimes are on the rise, what crimes are decreasing. They have to try and group them. They obviously can record hundreds of crimes, but it's clunky and it's hard for them to use. Therefore, they try and categorise crimes in different categories. So what we're going to look at today is basically the different categories of crime, the types of crime they use. These are the 6 sort of broad categories or headings the Scottish Government tend to use when recording crime statistics. So the first one is white collar crime, the second blue collar crime, third crimes of hatred, fourth cybercrime, fifth domestic abuse, and sixth violent crime. They use these categories because they break up sufficiently, but 6 is probably enough so that you can have sort of broad trends within those 6 categories. There's obviously subcategories, but we'll just focus on these 6 here. So the 6 types of crimes. When we talk about types of crimes, will be these 6 here: white collar, blue collar, crimes of hatred, cybercrime, domestic abuse, and violent crime. What I'm going to ask you to do now is to use the documents. So you've all got documents shared with you which look like these here. So we've got one that's got the types of crime here, one that has got definitions, and one that has got examples. What I would like you to do is basically try and categorize them. So obviously we've got the different categories, the 6 categories here. I would like you to try and come up with definitions. So what definition do you think goes with each one? For 4 of them, I think you'll find quite easy. The blue collar versus white collar one may be slightly trickier. If you need to Google around that, feel free to do so. And then finally, we've got examples, so I would like you to try and pick out some examples that match up. For this task, you don't need to write anything down. What I would like you to do is to maybe use colouring to highlight it. So for example, I might select cybercrime, highlight it as red. I would then go to the definitions, read the definitions, try and figure out which definition I think would be for cybercrime. So say for example, I thought it was this one here. Might be, might not be. I'd highlight that one red as well. And then I like to go to the examples and have a look here and think which one of these might be a cybercrime. So for example, computer hacking. And highlight that red. So what you should have by the time you've done this task is highlighted it. So one red, whatever colour you pick, you'll have one red type, one red definition, and then one red example to go with it. There are several different crimes and there's more than 6, so just pick one per category just now. Some of the crimes may fall under 2 categories as well, which is fine, so it doesn't necessarily matter at this point whether it falls under 2 categories or not. Again, pause the video, do your highlighting. Once you think you've got 6 definitions highlighted in 6 different colours, 6 explained, and 6 examples, restart the video. Okay, the second task is recording this. So for modern studies in National 5, the main type of knowledge question is point, explain, example. As we mentioned before, it's something those who pick modern studies in 3rd year know a lot about. Basically, for that, you need a point. So for this sort of question, the point would be the categories. You then need an explanation, so a definition of it. And finally, you need an example of that sort of crime. So for definition, you do not need to have the whole definition you may have previously highlighted. I would just shorten it down, copy the key bit. So you might, for example, for white collar crime, you might tell me that white collar crime is crimes committed by more wealthy people. There might be things like fraud, and then you might have an example might be fraud or tax evasion, and one example you have off this sheet. If you are wanting to add more than the one example you have from the previous sheet, you can go through the previous sheet and look through and add more. Or on the next slide, there are lots of different crimes here, and you could use some of these for adding to your examples. So for example, if I looked at this, I might say tax avoidance is a good example of a white collar crime, so I might add it down as my example of white collar crime. So what you'll have at the end of this task is a table like this, which will have the 6 categories of crime, 6 definitions of what they are, and then 6 examples of that type of crime. Again, pause the video, come back to it once you've completed that, and have that within your notes document. Okay, so the final thing we're doing, and what we're trying to build up a skill here, is making sure we can put what we've learned into an exam style question. So an exam style question on this topic might look a little bit like this. So I've got a National 5 and National 4 one. The National 5 and National 4 one differ from the example. So if you look at the National 5 one, it says describe in detail 3 different types of crime. 8 marks. For 8 marks, you need to do 3 point, explain, examples. A mark for a point, a mark for explain, a mark for example. For the 6 mark, describe 3 different types of crime. It's just point, explain. So if you're confident enough to add an example, do the National 5 one. If you're not quite sure how to do it yet, or you want to build up a skill, I would start with the National 4 one. A little bit of guidance on doing it. This is what you want to have here. So you want to have 3 paragraphs like this. The first one will be the point, so you'd say one type of crime in the UK is white collar crime. That will get you a mark. The second sentence, you're describing the point and why it's relevant, so you're describing basically the type of crime. So white collar crime are crimes committed mainly by richer people. They may be crimes that are less violent than other sorts of crimes, such as blue collar crime. And you say, for example, and you give a relevant real life example. There are some examples on the next page. This is going to be the hardest bit for you to remember, the different examples. There's lots to learn for National 5 modern studies, but again, it's something you'll build up. We'll talk about revision skills in the next few weeks as well, and how to build up those skills. But the most important thing you get at this point is the point example. So make your point, one sort of crime is this, explain what sort of crime is, and then give an example for it as well. Some examples you might want to include might be some of these. So one example of a murder case, example of an attempted murder, an example of an assault, example of fraud, example of shoplifting. So if you want to use any of those different examples, you could feel free. So you might have point, one type of crime in the UK is violent crime. You explain that violent crimes, give an explanation of what they are, and then you say an example of violent crime was, and you can talk about murder, attempted murder, obviously different sorts of violent crime. I would complete this question in your P document, so your P or skill document. So what you should hopefully have by the end of this lesson are 3 key things. You should have a definition of crime. You should know the government allows you to decide where crimes are made. You should know about 16 categories of crime. You should have gone through and highlighted your copy of the sheet, the different categories, the definitions and examples. You should have filled out this table, given me a definition of each of the 6 different sorts of crime, and given an example for each. You could use this table if you need to, and you should have completed this P question, either the 8 mark National 5 one, 3 point explain examples, or the National 4 one, 3 point explains. and that is your lesson on the different types and categories of crime.